Why, hello there, friends. Welcome to our Sunday SBT teaching. My name is Venerable Tarpa, and today we are going to be exploring a fascinating topic in Buddhism, the concept of the 12 links of dependent origination. Boy, that's a mouthful. And it's actually one of the more complicated concepts in Buddhism. I think generally it's kind of straightforward. It's just detailed. Anyways, like always, my job is to make it easy for everybody to understand and try to simplify it and try to make some sense of it. As a secular Buddhist group, we're often topic by topic trying to figure out, well, how does a secular Buddhist approach these things, right? So let's begin by once again talking about dependent origination. I believe our last two teachings so far have been about this. And but the fact is, dependent origination is possibly the most foundational principle in all of Buddhism. The central doctrine underlying all of the Buddhist teachings. In one way or another, I think you can point to the Buddhist teachings all being directly related to dependent origination. And, I'm supposed to show you a slide. Let me see if I can follow my notes. Here we go, here we go. Just to back up that claim, according to the Buddha from the scriptures, from the sutras, one who sees dependent origination sees the Dharma. One who sees the Dharma sees dependent origination. So from the Buddha's mouth itself, this is how important dependent origination is in Buddhism. And dependent origination is the Buddhist teachings on causality, asserting that everything that arises in dependence on causes and conditions. And without the support of appropriate causes and conditions, that given phenomena will not be able to arise or remain in existence. Causality and dependent origination are inseparable, with causality describing the basic principle of cause and effect, and dependent origination revealing how all phenomena arise and cease through intricate network of conditional causes. So there's two different mechanisms or views on the way causation works. The first is the idea that dependent origination is about interdependence, that things are made up of all kinds of other things. And the example traditionally given is one called Indra's net, in which the Buddha talked about a net like a fishing net. And at every crosshair of a line, there is a shining jewel. And the jewels are so reflective that they pick up the reflection of every other jewel in the net. And the idea is that all things are contained within that. Everything is interdependent. So that's one side, but then there's the other side. And this other side of dependent origination is particularly pertains to the 12 links of dependent origination. And it's more of a stacked view. And I have a slide for that one. So this is from, So when there is this, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. Where there is not this, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. So you can see why I call this a stacked method. And I have another example I want to show everybody. I'll show you in a second. So these are the two kind of mechanisms for it. And why don't we take a peek at, let's take a moment to take a peek right at the 12 links. Once again, I made a handy dandy beautiful chart for everybody. I love my charts. Let me center that for you. So these are the 12 links to dependent origination. You know, the biggest hurdle with this is just terminology. They traditionally use some pretty weird terms for some pretty basic items. So we're going to kind of look at this in layers. So first, let's just look at the 12 links. The first one is ignorance. The second one, volitional. Well, the first one is ignorance. That's not knowing, knowing the wrong thing, or not wanting to know. Number two is volitional formations. This is karma, right? Karmic formations. Number three is consciousness, but specifically, this is sense consciousness, right? This is the consciousness of the eye, which is eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose. It's the knowing of that sense organ, right? Number four is name and form. This is basically the five aggregates. This is just body and mind. Number five is the six sense faculties. And these are more of the sense organs themselves. You might have noticed we have the number six instead of five. Buddhism posits the five ordinary senses, eye, nose, mouth, ear, tactile sensation. But Buddhism includes mental sense. And I always thought that this is absolutely brilliant. There is no denying that we have this mental sense. You're aware of thoughts. You're aware of emotions. You're aware, you're self-aware. You're aware of yourself, right? This internal phenomena, this environment, we are aware of, right? That's a sense in itself. So that's the sixth sense. Unlike the movie, where you won't see dead people when you practice this. Number six, contact. That is the sense organ, like the eye, making contact with an object. Number seven is feeling. Some people call this feeling tone. And the idea is that when we notice an object, even before we're aware of it, the mind is already deciding, do I like it? Do I not like it? Or is it neutral? Those three things, right? It doesn't get into specifics. That happens later. Well, I would like that if it had chocolate on it. That's my thinking. That comes later. Number eight is craving. Craving is a exaggerated desire, right? Desire taken to the next level. Number nine is clinging, where craven is taken to the next level. Let alone do we have a desire and then we crave it, but then we cling to it. I must have that chocolate. Number 10 is existence, and it's a bit of a puzzling link. Sometimes they call it becoming, and I'll talk about that in a second. Number 11 is birth or rebirth. Number 12 is aging and death. So those are the 12 links. Now, to understand them, we're going to kind of peel away at them. We're going to talk about different aspects of them and how they pertain to different things. Let's first look over here on the left-hand side. You see these handy boxes I made. Right here, 1 through 5 are background experiences. And basically, it's happening and you're not aware of it. There's a subconscious mechanism that's going on. A lot of this pertains to cognition. A lot of this is like the links or steps in cognition of the mind in a certain state, seeing an object, cognizing the object, making sense, discerning the object, feelings about that object, that kind of thing. So 1 through 5 are background experiences. And then 6 through 10 are conscious experiences. Or let's say they can be, because a great deal of this happens without us knowing about it. So maybe it's better to say 6 through 10, we can become conscious of it. It takes a person who's examining themselves and their life to really fully be conscious of these, right? And then the last 2 are kind of on their own. Okay, what do I want to say about these things? Give me 1 second. So the 12 links, so there's a lot of different presentations and ideas and interpretations of the 12 links. And basically, there's a couple reasons for it. One is that they're not necessarily shared in only one place in the sutras. There's a dozen places where they share the links in different order, in different amounts, pertaining to different things. Now, some may say, well, then that sounds like an error in the sutras, but many scholars say that they believe that it has much more to do with the different audiences that the Buddha was teaching to. And so he was known to implement skillful teaching, where he could change the teachings according to audiences, so people could understand. So these discrepancies don't necessarily paint a negative picture of this particular teaching. It just brings in a complexity. So the 12 links in one aspect are believed, and actually in the earliest account, pertain to suffering, the mechanism of suffering, how suffering arises and how the cessation of suffering is gained. And it seems later it was turned more into the process of rebirth, how we come into being a human being and go through life and are be reborn. And then later, especially in modern scholars, they like to look at the 12 links as pertaining to our experience of existence in every moment, much more related to our senses, to our perspective, to cognition. So some would see it as like mental and cognitive process, right? The 12 links of that. And then still, some say that the 12 links explains the arising of self or identity. The great Ajahn Brahm, the Thai forest monk from England, was quoted, he said, the main purpose of the 12 links is to explain how there can be rebirth without a soul. So that's one point. And why there is suffering and how to end suffering. So he kind of covers all of it, right? So let's get back to the slide. So in the sutras, the Buddha talks about this. Now, this is related to this idea of dependent origination as being stacked. One thing exists because of another thing. And this is directly, oh, sorry. I had that up, right? You guys saw that. This is directly from the sutras. So according to the Buddha, dependent on ignorance, the first, right? Volitional formations arise. Depending on the volitional formations, consciousness arises. Depending on consciousness, name and form arise. Depending on name and form, the six senses arise. Depending on the six senses, contact arises. Depending on contact, feeling arises. From that feeling, craving. From that craving, clinging. From that clinging, existence. From that existence, birth. From that birth, aging and death. So this is the Buddha's primary understanding of dependent arising or dependent origination, how everything is stacked on top of each other, right? The Buddha does talk about interdependence in other parts as well, but this is much more foundational. So myself, when I talk about dependent origination, I try to focus more on this than I do interdependence. And then the Buddha shares in the same sutra the cessation of suffering. And he says just the opposite. With the cessation of ignorance comes the cessation of volitional action. Cessation of volitional action, cessation of consciousness, cessation of consciousness, etc., all the way down, right? So this is the Buddha's explanation of, one, the apparatus and mechanism of suffering. Two, the apparatus and method of samsara, including rebirth. Now, some take it even farther Am I supposed to talk about that now? Yeah, why not? Well, let's talk about this. I'm gonna give me 1 second. Let's talk about this. So in Tibetan Buddhism, they have this lovely fella. This is my dear friend Yama. Yama is the Lord of Death. So some of you, if you've gone to Tibetan Dharma centers or monasteries, you've probably seen this. This is usually somewhere near the front door. They call this the Wheel of Life. And the Wheel of Life kind of contains the Buddhist cosmology. And it's quite fascinating. So if you can see it, I hope it's big enough for everybody to see. In the very center, we have three things. We have a pig, we have a rooster, and we have a snake. They represent the three poisons, which is ignorance, hatred, and greed. Outside of that, we have these black and whites. This is positive and negative karma, or skillful and unskillful. These guys around here are the 6 realms of existence where you can be reborn into. And then lastly, all around the outside, we have the 12 links of dependent and origination. They don't necessarily directly coincide with each other. It's just a chart showing each map, each illustration, right? And then at the top here, what do we have? We have the Buddha pointing to the moon. The Buddha pointing to the moon is the Buddha pointing out the nature of reality. He's pointing out liberation to all of us. So the idea is escape all of this and head to the moon. Give Elon Musk a call. Say, I want to get out of here. Okay, with that said, so now we get into the authenticity of the teaching. There are a lot of people with a lot of views of this. Some people claim the 12 links are the greatest teachings of the Buddha. I disagree. Dependent origination is the greatest teaching of the Buddha, but I think the 12 links are problematic in a lot of ways. First of all, through the centuries, there's been a lot of presentations. We have the 12 links, and then there was the 11 links. In most sutras, there's 10 links, but then there's a 6-link model. There's a 5-link model and a 3-link model. 3-link was the original, right? Now, some people believe the 3-link model is actually the Four Noble Truths themselves. And then when we talk about rebirth, some assert that the 12 links represents, or let's say the most common presentation is a 3-lifetime system. The 12 links explain rebirth within 3 lifetimes. Some claim, no, it's 2 lifetimes. Very popular that they're explained within a single lifetime. And then there's some who claim the 12 links represent one mind moment, a one mind moment system, that in every blink of the eye, every moment, the mind is going through those 12 links. So now you're starting to see the difficulty in presenting this to everybody. And I have to make some kind of sense. Well, how are we going to do it? In my book, Tibetan Buddhist Essentials, I have a lovely presentation of the Tibetan view. Tibetans like to follow the 3-lifetime system. And but as you can imagine, secular Buddhists who oftentimes don't like the idea of rebirth. A lot of secular Buddhists reject rebirth. At SBT, we don't. We just leave it to the individual. How are we supposed to tell everybody what is, right? That's not right. We share. The Buddha believed in it. There's no doubt about that. Every word, every paragraph, and every sutra, the Buddha's talking about rebirth. It doesn't necessarily mean he's right, and you should all follow your own sensibilities. I personally have a belief in rebirth. It's a loose one. I can't prove it, but I think it's for me, it's one of the best choices out of what we have to choose. But some people just find it distasteful, they just reject it. So we don't push it at all here. Each one of us has to decide for themselves. So as you can imagine, secular Buddhists just cannot entertain, most cannot entertain any kind of idea that these are related to rebirth or multiple rebirths. And most secular Buddhists, including Stephen Batchelor, John Peacock, they kind of look at the 12 links as a model of cognition. They look at this as a model of how the mind puts together reality in every moment, right? And so in the end of this teaching, we're just going to try to explore some of that, because as you can see by the names of a lot of these things, none of it is very clear, right? But I wrote here in the smaller orange boxes, past, present, and future. So those can be taken as 3 different lifetimes, or they can be related to within one lifetime, right? And so I guess we just dig in. So we got this, so in the past, so in our current state right now, our mental state is a collection of our ignorance, our karma, volitional formations, which includes intentions, our sense consciousness. A lot of people have problems with the idea of sense consciousness here. Many people think it's in the wrong order. How could sense consciousness derive directly from these others? Some people believe that this consciousness isn't sense consciousness. In the sutras, the Buddha is very clear that it is, but others believe it's not sense consciousness. It's that which is reborn, right? It's that consciousness that is reborn. And it does make the model a little bit, makes sense a little bit better. But is it accurate? Not according to scriptures, right? And so anyways, those 3 first links would be related to the past. And then present are this body and mind, which is always in a state of flux, so that's kind of a current thing. Our 6 sense faculties, which goes along with the body. Basically, it's the actual organs of our senses. Then we have contact. So by having a body, name and form, and having these sense organs, the contact is made when consciousness of number 3 makes contact with an object and produces this idea of sense consciousness. All right? And then from that sense consciousness, and that's your awareness of that object, right? You see a pretty flower. Your eyeball makes contact with the flower, the object, and then through that, the knowing of that flower, that is the sense consciousness, is produced. From that, then automatically a feeling comes about. The mind automatically goes right to, do I like it? Do I not like it? Is it neutral? It categorizes it. This is a very, very subconscious kind of primitive kind of discernment. It's way before you're thinking about what you think about it, right? This is a very kind of primordial kind of feeling. And then from that sense comes craving. Now, craving or desire, you could crave it, you could crave to be away from it as well. It's both attraction and aversion. And then that can exaggerate into clinging, that you must have it, right? Almost the power of addiction, right? So that, as you can see, that is kind of the mechanism of cognition, right? This is an early Buddhist model of how the mind and the senses work with the external world, right? Now, number 10, existence, is a hard one. The Buddha claims in the most important of all of the sutras of this, claims that existence is to exist in one of the 3 realms. And we looked at the Tibetan Buddhist wheel of life in the different realms. So the Buddha's clear that it's about actually existing, Many people interpret existence as becoming, and they assert that actually this is much more about the creation of the self and the identity. So it's the creation of I. In Tibetan Buddhism, they call it the mere I, merely I. I exist, right? That 10 is the existence, is the beginning of that. And so that's present. And now birth, aging, and death are seen as happening in another lifetime or later than that. And of course, birth is rebirth, right? And then aging and death, as you can imagine. Any questions? Yes, Miss Lebdrung.
So yeah, so when you get to like number 9 with the clinging, is that where we'd create new karma? Would that be where we could make a choice not to cling and not to create karma?
I'm not going
Or
to enjoy any of these questions.
oh, okay, yeah.
No, I'm joking.
Oh,
No, just
yeah. I was just
no,
thinking, yeah, because
not
you
because
obviously you got, yeah.
I was
Sorry.
joking. It's not because of the questions. It's just about how confusing the whole model is. I've
Yeah,
never been a big fan of the 12 links. I do believe it's really important. I'm glad I studied it thoroughly. But for me, it was one of those things that I got a good understanding and then I set it aside, right? So I do believe it's important. Where does karma come in? In the past, volitional formations is previous karma. So So, great question, by the way, Kat. So, we have the first contact, clinging existence. I would think so. I would think that karma comes in clinging, and depending on how we interpret existence, it would come in after that as well. I think it would be a product of clinging and existence. To be honest, I don't really know the answer to that question. That is an excellent question. I can get back to you on that one. Yes, stumped me. Any other questions? Yeah, Dana, please.
If you're willing, it would help me if you ran through this with an example, like your relationship with Ben and Jerry's ice cream.
Sure. Okay. So the box up here with the first three, which have to do with past, these are things in the past that make me who I am right now, right? There are things that establish my current mental state, emotional state, it my karma, my consciousness, all of those things. So and then comes next is just the real that I have a mind and body that possesses the six faculties. So I have all that. So that's me, right? This background experience, this whole top box. This is the things leading up to who I am. And then I see Ben and Jerry's ice cream out of the corner of my eye. That's contact. From my senses and my consciousness, all this stuff, making contact with, because consciousness here is the sixth sense consciousness, but it's also mental consciousness. It's also the mind interpreting what the senses see. So I make contact with Ben and Jerry's. From that contact, feelings come up based on prior experiences, whatever it may be. And I might feel so happy because it's there. I might feel miserable because I recently have diabetes and I cannot eat it, and it's complete torture for me to look at it. But from that feeling of like would come craving. From that craving, that pattern habituates, becomes deeper, it becomes clinging. Here, existence is the big problem in the 12 links. Everyone has a problem with this. Some would say that this means beginning, which, being, which is related to the self. I'm just going to set that aside. That's the mechanism for my experience with Ben and Jerry's. But let's say it was a really negative experience, like killing someone or something. That would all be related to your next rebirth and aging and death. And by the way, here, birth and aging and death. Birth happens the moment conception happens in the womb. Aging and death happens the moment after that conception. Isn't that a weird thought? You think of aging and death as being the last thing in your life. But according to Buddhism, as soon as that consciousness enters the womb, that your mind enters the womb and into that egg, that's the beginning of rebirth. And a moment later is aging and death, because it's the beginning of aging and death. Fascinating, huh?
Can I ask you about the make a comment about the existence? What it comes to me is that, okay, the contact, the feeling, the craving, the clinging, now there is Ben and Jerry's there, and I am here. I exist. The more that I cling, or the more I push away, I become me. I become I.
That is one of the interpretations. That's why they call it beginning. And they refer to beginning being the creation of the mere I. So one could say that, let's say we do the same thing 1 through 5, but on contact, let's say it's a more profound thing. Maybe contact is the world, and that we're aware that we're existing in the world, right? And then through that feeling, craving, clinging, yeah, the mere I is born, the I is born, and we say to ourselves, yes, I exist. Again, there's so many different interpretations of this, it's really hard to figure out. It's really hard to make sense. I am going to make sense of it for you. Right now, I want you to be as bewildered as I am. Tibetan Buddhism is very clear about exactly the steps within the womb that these are all happening. Most of this to them is actually within the womb. And you can read about that in my book, Tibetan Buddhist Essentials. It's in volume 2. Darcy, please.
So would number 10, existence, could that be like after all this contact, feeling, craving, clinging, would that be more self-awareness at that point?
It could be, or maybe it's just acknowledgement of existence.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe all those other things have to be there just for our cognition to be fully engaged and to be able to say, I exist right here, right now.
Okay.
Over this week, I've read so many interpretations of that, and just none of it seemed to make a lot of sense. Modern people are making sense of it, but changing it dramatically from the Buddha's teachings. I try, even though I'm a secular teacher and we're quite a modern group, I'm a real stickler when it comes to the sutras and sticking with what the Buddha thought. We can't just change things to make them more practical. They have to coincide with the sutras, right? And by the way, at the end of this teaching, I'll be posting all the sutras I used to come up with this presentation. Ms. Wamo?
What do you think about the idea where they say that this existence is it's tied to you realizing impermanent suffering and no soul?
Well, that's an aspect of it.
Okay.
And some would say, including me, that those are examples of dependent origination.
Okay.
To me, all of the Buddhist teachings are based on dependent origination in one form or another. The 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths,
Okay.
the
All
2
of it.
truths. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to get into that in a little bit.
All right.
So understanding it is one thing, and then what to do with it is another. Right? Any other questions? I'm not sure if I can really explain much better. Everybody get all the terminologies? There's another thing I'm going to share with everybody. In my research, I came across a paper by Doug Smith, who does Doug's Dharma. We're all huge fans of him. And his videos are awesome, but his writing is really awesome. He is a really brilliant, brilliant scholar. And he shares a great paper on, are the 12 links salvageable? And it's kind of it's a very, very deeply researched paper. And of course, he brings in secular Buddhists. He's a secular Buddhist teacher. And he entertains this thought. Is this even applicable to modern life? And with so many different versions, can it be? Anyways, instead of trying to cover that, I thought I would just share the article. So I'll post that with the sutras. And anybody that's into this, it's a must read. It's just brilliant. And I don't know enough about it to really go into detail, but he's talking like the first three, just throw them away and see what else we have left over. But it's a really thoughtful account of it all. David, please share.
Is it worthwhile us paying any attention to this?
That's the point I'm going to come to next. Yes, I believe it is.
Okay.
Remember, the Buddha thought it was worthwhile to share, and he shared it throughout various sutras. And so it's very important to him. But he also, at one point, talks to Ananda, and he says, Ananda thinks he gets it. Oh, yeah, I got this dependent origination thing. And the Buddha says, oh, no, be careful. This is very deep, very hard to understand, known only by the wise, and Tenzin Tarpa. So, yeah, it's intense. It helps us when understanding cognition is helpful. And anyway, we're going to talk about that in a second if you can hang in there, David. So, I stumbled across something that I thought was absolutely fascinating, and maybe many of you will as well. And looking at the different versions of the 12 links, that the first versions of the 12 links began with desire instead of ignorance, or in the Pali term is translated to thirst. But then at a later time, it seems like the Buddha changed it to ignorance. And what was fascinating is that this sheds some light on the question of why the Buddha, in the Four Noble Truths, the second noble truth, presents desire as the main cause of suffering instead of ignorance, right? The Four Noble Truths, very clear, desire is the cause for suffering. But in later sutras, the Buddha goes on further to say that ignorance is. And for Buddhist scholars, it becomes clear. And the reason is because desire can be broken down. Desire has a cause, right? We desire things out of our ignorance, right? Our not knowing. So that always makes sense to us. But I was always puzzled why in the Four Noble Truths, he clearly decides to use desire. So isn't that fascinating, huh? Those little gems I just love running across. And I told you about Doug Smith's paper, so we're going to take a look at that. Okay, on to David's question. Why the bleep does this matter? My favorite part of the teachings. And dependent origination and conditionality are simply foundational in every aspect of our lives, giving rise to everything. All external phenomena and all internal phenomena. Internal phenomena being mental phenomena, concepts, emotions, all experiences, all feelings, sensations, perceptions, all thought, all intentions, and all actions. So when we state that awakening is to realize the true nature of ourselves in reality, then to directly realize dependent origination is to realize the Dharma. It's to realize awakening, to free ourselves of suffering and mundane existence. Simply said, when we know how things work, we suffer less. When we have that epiphany, oh, that's why I'm always doing that thing. That's why every time I hit myself on the side of the head with the hammer, I get a painful sensation. So understanding the world is one of the greatest ways to transcend suffering. When we understand how things work, even if we can't stop it, we still suffer less, right? So the second, and I think even more important question, is what do we do with this teaching? And most important, how do we practice? So the Buddha already gave us the practice for realizing dependent origination. The most directive is through understanding the Four Noble Truths and the practice of the four tasks, which we all practice here. That is acknowledging suffering. Does anybody remember what they were? Acknowledging, suffering has to be known.
Yeah,
Its
suffering
causes
to be
have to be
known,
abandoned. Wait one
abandoned.
second, wait one second, Kat. She's gonna beat me to it, make me look bad. Its cessation is to be known, actualized, and the path is to be relied upon. Just teasing, Kat. You're wonderful. Thank you for that. And since dependent origination is the foundational principle of all the Dharma, then all the Buddhist teachings and practice work towards a direct realization of dependent origination and causality. So we had this up a second ago. Take a look at this. So we have this dependent on ignorance, we have this causation, blah, blah, blah. You see how this is the Four Noble Truths, isn't it? This is all of these things lead to suffering. So this is the first two truths, isn't it? In opposite order. I mean, this starts with the cause, but it is the first two truths. And guess what? These are the second truths. All right, this is 3 and 4. And so when we talk about how are we going to practice dependent origination, you're already doing it. The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Threefold Path. This is working with the 12 links of dependent origination and working towards liberation. So just like how the Threefold Path is elaborated on and made into the Eightfold Path, you could think of the Four Noble Truths being elaborated on as the 12 links of dependent origination. It's just a deeper explanation of what it is, right? And you don't have to know the exact mechanisms for rebirth to escape it. So, if you want to focus your practice on the 12 links, it's said that only the links we can actually work with are 6 through 10. I never tried to work with them directly. To me, it was more of a conceptual understanding that benefited my practices and other things. So 1 through 5, of course, because it's background experience, we can't necessarily work with them unless we're very amazing practitioners. But generally, here, 6 through 10, conscious experiences is what we work with. Contact, feeling, craving, clinging, existence. And guess what works with that? The Four Noble Truths, right? The Threefold Path, the four tasks. All of our various Buddhist practice are directly related to this. Meditation, mindfulness, yeah? Then the last two we can't work with. These are kind of karmically We do this within our lives, and then karmically, we don't have much control over these. This is just the result. You did it, and now you got to pay for it, right? So I recommend that what we do with this is we study it and understand it, and then and I think that understanding informs our other practices. So it's just a bit of a deeper understanding about causality. But is a deep, deep knowledge of it important? I'll leave that up to you. Dana, please share.
I just you show that the ignorance is number one, and it's
Yeah.
and that's the past. But it seems to me that that there's some ignorance that through understanding that I've overcome. Not I don't know what I don't know, but I do know that I have a different understanding today of some things than I did before in my life. So
You
it seems
sure
like
do.
you can do something about number one.
Well, you can work with all of them. So say you're working 6 through 10 and you're doing with the Four Noble Truths or whatever, that's going to influence your level of ignorance. So in your next life, according to traditional Buddhism, when you're reborn with a lesser state of ignorance.
Okay.
And then other things are important to know, like there's different kinds of ignorance, isn't there? I mean, there is this foundational ignorance related to our understanding of ourselves, which is foundational in samsara and suffering. But I think the idea of ignorance needs to be looked at in a much more nuanced way. We can clearly have luck at working with certain kinds of ignorance and not others. There's definitely this foundational ignorance, and then also more surface level ignorances. So I'm with you. I would open that up. I would open it up to a spectrum of ignorance, right? Yeah, but I think that's the idea of this cycle, is that by working on ourselves, every time we come back to rebirth, we've improved, and then in the next life, all of these are more advanced. We've improved them all. I think that's the idea of working towards enlightenment through many lifetimes. But you're still working with only 6 through 10. So 6 through 10 is your practice. You do a good job. And 11 and 12 are just kind of, according to Buddhism, kind of guaranteed. You earned a good rebirth. So you're born, aging and death process starts, even though you're still in the womb. You're born, and now you have a different level of ignorance because of your past life practice. That informs your volitional formations. Again, consciousness is a strange one in this list. The Buddha is so clear that this is related to sense consciousness, but it would make a lot more sense if it was related to the foundational consciousness. But then again, wouldn't that have to come first? Because that's like the birth process. That would be that. It seems like that consciousness would need to go before 11, because that consciousness is what would be born. So this is one of the reasons I don't focus on this. I don't teach it much. I did write extensively about it in my text, Tibetan Buddhist Essentials, but I just not always quite sure the benefit to people. And from an academic standpoint, I think everyone should study it. Day to day, I'm not sure if it makes a big difference for people, but nevertheless, I had a lot of requests to share it, so I'm so glad I did. Dana, do you have another question? You have a hand up. Oh, okay. Anybody else want to share? I can't see everybody on my screen. What do you think, David? Did I answer your question?
Have I got to answer that?
No, but you can.
Well, I mean, for me, it's just far too convoluted. Every second sentence has got about 3 different interpretations, multiplying itself up to about 1 billion different interpretations. And I don't have enough lifetimes, I think, to. Dependent origination is foundational, no question, but this is not my way for examining it further.
Yeah, and so
I
I have some
enjoyed the
similar.
course. I
I
enjoyed
think
your
the
talk. Sorry.
I think the paper that I'm sharing from Doug Smith is really going to illuminate it for a lot of people,
Okay.
because I didn't want to come in here and attack it. I wanted to make. I knew a lot of people have never seen it before. So I needed to come in gently and give you guys an idea of how it, and some possible ways to work with it. Where Doug's paper is directly at assassination of it. Well, he's a sweet guy, so he's not but, just a very thoughtful account of just how abstract it is and how maybe there's nothing salvageable about it. And I can't make that decision.
I look forward to reading that. Thank you, Tarpa.
But I do believe a basic understanding of what it is, what you got today, I think that would be really helpful for folks. Yeah, and that's about all I got. So again, to me, you want to work on dependent origination, it's the Four Noble Truths. It's right there. The 4 tasks, right? All these things are dependent, right? Yeah. Understanding causality. Okay, good. Hey, with that said, we're in the middle of our retreat day, everybody, and it's a very exciting thing. We got a couple more events ahead of us. One of them is our next is our purification ceremony, and that's going to be in about 30 minutes. It is a wonderful ceremony. Everybody's invited. It's a short ceremony. It's so pretty. You will be filled with goodness, and you'll learn more about SBT. You'll hear the vows that people take and things like that. It's quite lovely. So again, that's in 30 minutes from now. And then after that, we're going to end the retreat at the end. We'll have a loving kindness meditation, which is just absolutely wonderful. I'm just trying to read some of the chats. Sorry I don't get to the chats, everybody. It's a little bit much for me to take in. Anyways, let's end today's teaching with our altruistic affirmation. May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well. May all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is the source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakened, which is dependent. Thanks for joining me, everybody. We'll see you in about a half an hour. Bye-bye, friends.